Good morning, all. This is Atlanta Soto Zen Center. Today is February 5th, no, February 4th, February 4th, 2024, believe it or not. 024 2024. And we're welcoming Shoryu from the Okumura lineage. I met Shoryu in Austin when his supervising teacher was Seirin Barbara Kohn of the Suzuki lineage. I was there for, I think, 3 months that summer in 2007. And here we are this many years later. Shoryu and I both continue our practice by some miracle. And I'm looking forward to his talk today. I think John Hinman has a more formal introduction with the title. Well, welcome, Shoryu. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Hojo. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce you to Shoryu Bradley. Shoryu was ordained as a Soto Zen priest in 2002 by Seirin Barbara Kohn at Austin Zen Center. In 2004, he moved to Bloomington, Indiana to study with Shohaku, Okumura Roshi, and Sanshin Zen community. Shoryu has also trained at Tassajara Zen Mountain Center and at the Sotoshu International Training Monastery, angos held in the US and Japan. In 2010, Shoryu received dharma transmission from Okumura Roshi. He holds a BS in psychology from Texas A&M University, also an M.Ed in Rehabilitation Counseling from the University of Texas at Austin. He has lived and practiced at Gyobutsuji since founding it in December 2011. Today, the Dharma talk is titled Practicing with the Fifth Bodhisattva, Precept of Not Indulging in Intoxicants, Embracing the Self that is only self. Shoryu, we welcome you.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here, and thank you, Tayun, for having me here. It's great to see you again and practice with you again after these many years. I have many fond memories of our practice together in Austin, Texas, and also in Bloomington, Indiana, with our teacher there. So we, I think we did a sesshin or two together in Bloomington as well in the mid 2000s. But
I was
it's
there for your ceremony as well. I was invited to.
That's right. I think you got to see me on the hot seat twice. I did it once in Austin. I think you were there, and I think you were there for the one in Bloomington too. So yeah, it's great to see you again, and it's great to be here in the Zoom realm at Atlanta Zen Center, and I hope someday to be able to actually visit the center in person. But for now, I'm happy to be here in the Zoom realm, and I'm here in Northwest Arkansas. We are just about 50 miles east of Fayetteville, Arkansas, in the Ozark Mountains. And Gyobutsuji, the small monastic practice place that we have here, is devoted to doing a sesshin in the style, our kind of family style of my teacher and his teacher. We do a kind of no toys sort of sesshin. We're devoted to that here. That's our main purpose for practice here at Gyobutsuji. So you're always welcome to visit here too. We'd love to have you come to Gyobutsuji if you're ever in our neck of the woods.
Sure.
So John was saying I could introduce folks that showed up from our community, and I made a mistake, and I did take into account the time difference. So I'm not sure how well it's going to work out for people to come, but I do have one member here, Lacey Cannon, who is here actually at Gyobutsuji with me, and let's see, Terry was here a minute ago too. I think I practiced with Terry Sutton. Oh, there's Terry. Okay. Terry, great to see you. Been many years we practiced together at Tassajara. I don't have to go into all the details, but I think he was a Tenzo or Fukuten when I was there. I worked in the kitchen with him a little bit, and we also practiced at Austin Zen Center together quite a few years ago. So great to see you again, Terry. And I will get started now. As John said, I'm going to talk about the fifth Bodhisattva precept today. And so probably most of us here are familiar with the Bodhisattva precepts. We have, of course, 16 precepts that Dogen Zenji handed down to us. And, we take the 3 refuges and the 3 pure precepts, and we have 10 major precepts, we call them, or grave precepts. So I've been talking about these precepts usually when I do a talk in another town or out of town for a few years now, just to study these precepts and understand them more deeply myself, and then invite others to study them with me. So I'm on that, as I say, this 5th precept. I'd just like to say a little bit about these in general, the precepts in general. They're very, this is a very deep practice and lifelong study, of course. These precepts, to me, are a way of returning to our vow or expressing our vow. We take a vow in our tradition to practice with all beings and to awaken with all beings. And these precepts are a way of studying how we do this on and off the Zazen cushion. So, and it's a way of studying this reality from a different perspective, a different way that we encounter this reality in which we express our vow with all beings and how we practice with it. So each one of these precepts is a kind of way of examining the way that we encounter the self and practice our vow from a different perspective. But each one of these precepts, I think, encompasses the entirety of all of them, but they have a unique thing to say about a particular way that reality is asking us in each moment to express our vow. How will we step up in this moment and express our vow? How will we respond? So I think of these precepts sort of as one way to think about them is they're like our Zazen posture, when we're sitting on the cushion. When we do Zazen, we're endeavoring to be here 100%, expressing our vow as Zazen. So 100% in time and space in this moment. Of course, we stray. We might get sleepy. We might, lean forward or backward, or we start thinking or dreaming, but we just come back to this present moment. So to me, these precepts are like our posture. They're a place that we return, a place that we find our refuge. So anyway, I'll get to talking about this 5th precept now. And as we take it in Dogen Zenji's lineage, it's stated this way: not selling intoxicating liquor. So Dogen Zenji then makes a little comment after that. The precept is literally not selling intoxicating liquor. Do not bring intoxicants in. Do not let them come in. This is truly the great brightness of wisdom. Another sort of translation of this that my teacher offered when studying these is, do not allow even that which has not yet been brought in to trespass. This is truly the great brightness of wisdom. So we'll talk about Dogen Zenji's commentary in a minute, but I like to, when studying these precepts, study the origins and the way that they are expressed in different traditions, and kind of how those shed light on our particular way of expressing this precept. So usually, and I did this with my teacher too, we would talk about the early precepts of early Buddhism in the Pali Vinaya. And that's one source, of course, of precepts. And then there are the one mind precepts of Bodhidharma. These are precepts and commentaries, a short commentary attributed to Bodhidharma that we can study. And also the Boman Kyo, or the Brahma Net Sutra from China, that this is the source of the Bodhisattva precepts that we actually take. So those are Mahayana precepts, and we'll talk about those a little bit. But first of all, the first kind of impression I have of this precept is it's interesting, because usually it's just sort of stated as not indulging in intoxicants, and I think that's a fair way to state it. But it's kind of unusual if we look at these other 10 precepts, the grave precepts. Number 5 is the only one that really doesn't state explicitly that it has something to do with our relationship with others. So we have not killing, not stealing, not lying, not indulging in, not misusing sexuality, and so forth, not speaking falsely of others, and so forth. So these all are, it's clear to see how they have to do with our Bodhisattva precept of awakening with all beings. But this precept of not indulging in intoxicants is different, it seems. It's not so apparent. So I was raised in a tradition, in a Christian tradition, where we were prohibited from drinking alcohol. We weren't supposed to take in a lot of different substances. And the rationale for that was, this body is a temple of God, and we don't want to defile it. And that was sort of the reason that we were given. And I had always kind of thought of this precept in that way, especially as it relates to early Buddhism, or the Vinaya precepts of Theravada monks and other early schools of Buddhism. So, but I want to explore that a little bit. So the thing about the Vinaya precepts, these early precepts, 250, 240 some odd, just depending on which Vinaya one refers to, are very strict rules that prescribe the conduct of monks. We don't take them in Zen. So there's a history behind that. I won't talk about that. But of course, these precepts have a big influence on the development of the Bodhisattva precepts too. But this is the more kind of relative or cause and effect perspective of basically don't use intoxicants, don't drink beer, don't drink alcohol. It's very clear. And there's in the Vinaya precepts, it's interesting because the Buddha added more and more precepts as monks started making mistakes. So there weren't like just preformed precepts that he thought people had to follow. It was like people making mistakes in society, and then he made a precept that said, don't do that anymore. So we have a record of all these precepts and the mistakes that they made, why these precepts were developed. So we can go back and look, at those mistakes. But this particular precept about not taking in alcohol had to do with a monk that was doing his rounds, his begging rounds. Of course, Theravada monks, early Buddhist monks, had to get all of their food and clothing and everything from the community. They begged, went around and did begging rounds and got their food that way. And before this precept of not using alcohol was in place, apparently they sometimes were offered alcohol. So there's, and they would take it apparently. There's a story of this one monk who, I won't read this account, but it kind of shows in the Vinaya that he was a very strong monk that had kind of supernatural powers. They say that he encountered a naga, which in ancient India was a kind of water snake deity, or there's a lot of different, forms of nagas, but this one was a fire-breathing snake, sort of, and it said that this monk encountered that naga, and the naga was disgruntled because he was in his space, and he breathed fire on him, and the monk was so powerful in his development that he was able to overpower that naga with his own fire. So these are kind of mythological things. I think, what it means is there was some way that he displayed that he was able to overcome his passions, or that naga was probably some way of facing himself, or an encounter of anger or some passionate thing. So we don't have to take it literally, but the point is that he somehow showed that he was a very powerful adept. And then he goes into this community on his begging grounds, and the Buddha comes into this community, and the monks follow him in. And the community is so happy to see the monks, they start asking around, is there anything that we can give you that you would like, that you don't get very often? And this group of 6 monks said, yes, there's this thing called pigeon alcohol. We would like to have some of that. Can you give us some pigeon alcohol? And so I don't know exactly what that is. They said it was the color of pigeon's feet. That's why they called it pigeon alcohol. But anyway, it was apparently a pretty good drink, because this monk that encountered the naga, the other monks encouraged him when he was doing his rounds, take some of this alcohol. They were really encouraging to do that, and he did. And I guess at every house he went to, that he got some alcohol until he got really drunk. And it turns out as he was leaving town, he passed out, and he was there lying on the road, and the other monks had to take him back to the monastery because he couldn't, go back himself. So he got totally blasted and passed out. And so the Buddha, they put him down in some place, and the Buddha is there, and they respectfully place the monk's body so that his head is facing the Buddha, which is the respectful way, to encounter the Buddha. You wouldn't put your feet facing the Buddha. And so there are all these kind of things of etiquette, of course, that you show a person of high respect in ancient India. And it turns out that the monk was just kind of rolling around. He ended up turning his feet towards the Buddha and not responding. And so he completely lost all his decorum and his composure, and didn't pay the respect to the Buddha. So the Buddha says, he's addressing the monks as he sees this, and he says, in the past, wasn't Sagata respectful to the Tathagata and deferential? Wasn't he respectful to the Buddha? Yes, Venerable Sir. But is he respectful to the Tathagata and deferential now? No, Venerable Sir. And didn't Sagata do battle with the Abhititha Naga? Yes, Venerable Sir. But could he do battle even with a salamander now? No, Venerable Sir. So he couldn't even encounter a salamander after he, defeated a fire-breathing snake, but he wasn't even worth up to an encounter with a salamander. So to me, it's really interesting that this precept is more about, to me, the relationship with our community, rather than the sort of defilement of the body as the way that I encountered it as a young person, that it was about sort of defiling this temple. But here it seems, even in this early form, it was more about respect and sort of representing the institution and the Buddha in an upright and respectful way without shame. So he kind of brought shame to the community and to the Buddha and to himself by getting drunk. So when I first, so I'm going to talk a little bit about alcohol now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the precept and alcohol. But, when I first started practicing Zen, I had no idea there was a prohibition against drinking in Buddhism. And, I didn't find out until quite a bit later, actually, that this precept was there or really had something to do with alcohol. And one of the things is that I noticed, if you've ever practiced with Japanese people, that I haven't met a Japanese monk yet. There probably are some there, but I haven't met a Japanese monk that doesn't drink. And when I was doing some practice in Japan, they brought out beer sometimes in the middle of as a way to kind of smooth things over or take a break, because the practice is very intensive. It didn't happen very often, but occasionally, maybe once in a 3-month practice period, this kind of thing would happen. And I kind of never really thought about the contradiction of what's happening here, but I did some investigation into it, because it does seem like there's a sort of contradiction, and it's kind of an unspoken elephant in the room. And what is this? Why? And it turns out that sake is very, very important in Japanese culture. It predates Buddhism by, at least 1,000 years or so. The importance of sake in the Shinto religion, which is the kind of indigenous religion of Japan, and the very traditional societal norms and forms of doing things, often come from Shinto, a combination of Shinto and Buddhism and Confucianism. And Taoism has a really big effect, of course, on Japanese culture, but Shinto is really important. And this relationship between Shinto and sake started when rice was first introduced in Japan. It seems they think it was about 2,000 years ago. Imagine when, Japan without rice. But soon after rice was introduced to Japan, people, of course, discovered that it could be fermented, and alcohol could be made from it. And it seems that the first kind of way that sake was made, rice wine, sake, was made with the people in the community chewed it up with nuts and spit it into some receptacle and let it ferment. And that was the origins of sake, people chewing it up and spitting it out. And that was the first form of sake. So kind of hard to imagine now doing that, but it was a communal experience. But the rice, it was considered that this was a offering from the gods. So in Shintoism, everything has a sort of spirit. Nature, the mountains have a spirit, flowers have it, rocks, trees, everything has a spirit and is alive and is to be honored. And the gods, these are called kami, if you're familiar with Japanese culture, these kami that are the gods that are all around us in nature. And the relationship with these kami has been very important since early Japanese history. And so it was considered that the gods, brought rice to the Japanese people. And it's a huge staple, of course, of Japanese culture is rice. And sake was offered as something to offer the gods as a gratitude and respect, and actually a way to connect with the gods. So, you drank sake not to really get intoxicated, but it was a way of connecting oneself with the kami and showing one's gratitude and connection to other people in the community. It was a communal ceremony. And so to me, when I read this, it reminded me somewhat of maybe how we think of, peyote or ayahuasca being used in indigenous cultures. And we understand that that's not about getting high, that's about connecting with the divine, using these drugs as a way to connect with the divine. So it's also, sake in Japanese culture became a way, as I said, to connect with other people, show respect to the gods, and also it's a kind of became a kind of leveling influence that people from different social strata. There's a very big, kind of pronounced social hierarchy, or there used to be in Japan. When people came together for events, for weddings, for any kind of ceremony, sake was there as part of the celebration, and it was also it was a way to offer to the gods and have a prayer for a good crop, or to protect the emperor or the aristocracy, or all of these things had to do with offering sake. And it also brought people together to kind of level out the social differences and the awkwardness that could happen when people from different social strata come together. So it was a way of not only connecting with the gods, but it was bringing the divine into oneself. So anyway, actually, it turns out that sake began being brewed in Buddhist temples at some point in medieval Japan. I mean, it sounds really unusual to us, but at some point, because of the social upheaval that happened, and the government collapsed, and government funding for these temples was no longer there. The individual, feudal lords were the people in power for some time, and so these institutions like temples had to find some other way of surviving. So they actually began brewing sake and selling it at some point in desperation as a way to continue their Buddhist practice. So it's very deeply ingrained, sake in the Japanese culture. And so when Buddhism came, it's hard to imagine that this thing that's so deep in the culture could be just overthrown completely. Buddhism has always kind of adapted to the culture that it goes to, and it's one of the features, Buddhism, why there's so many iterations of Buddhism in the world, is that it can adapt to many different cultures. But anyway, I'm not really making a commentary on whether it's good or not that Buddhist monks often drink sake or not. I mean, but I just thought this was interesting, and to me, it kind of solved a question that I had about this, of why it's this contradiction is there. But it also says something about intoxicants and what the relative nature of what is an intoxicant, and what really makes an intoxicant, and what makes something a way, a kind of divine or magical elixir to connect with others. So ancient Indian culture and ancient Japanese culture, I think, were very different, and so there was kind of a clash. But anyway, I'll go on to the next thing. There's a lot that could be said about that, but we'll keep going. So the next thing that we could take a look at is Bodhidharma's one mind precept in studying this precept. So Bodhidharma's precepts, of course, are Mahayana precepts, and these emphasize the kind of emptiness, the unity. We chanted the Heart Sutra this morning, and of course, Bodhidharma's one mind precepts are like a sort of expression of that emptiness that was chanted this morning in the Heart Sutra. So we'll talk about this in a moment too, but Bodhidharma's fifth precept says, self-nature is wondrous and imperceptible. Self-nature is wondrous and imperceptible. Within the intrinsically pure Dharma, not being blinded by ignorance is called the precept of not drinking intoxicating liquor. So a very important part here, this is talking about the self. The self nature is wondrous and imperceptible. what does that mean? We understand, many of us, of course, we study all of our life, the Heart Sutra, Prajnaparamita Sutras, and the meaning that it has for us in our life and practice. But just, just briefly, the way that I like to express what he's saying here, one way of expressing what he's saying here, this wondrous nature of the self, often use an example of a person, say, playing a violin in a symphony. When we really sort of study the sound or the offering of music that person is making, we find it's impossible to find the origin of that sound, really. So on one level, the person is simply playing a violin, and they have to 100% take responsibility as an individual, and in the moment play the violin. As they're doing that, they have to also, though, listen to the rest of the orchestra. They have to pay attention to the conductor. They have to play the music as it's written, and they have to respond to the other musicians. So they have 100% responsibility for their own practice, and yet they're completely an expression of the whole symphony. And if they don't find their place as an expression of the whole, they can't express their individual self or vow. And beyond that, if we start looking at the violin itself, it's made of wood. So all of the pieces that go into the orchestra are like this. But so if we look at a piece of wood, where that comes from, it comes from trees, which are nurtured by the soil, which are nurtured by air, are nurtured by the sun, which is revolving around in space in a certain way. The Earth is revolving around the sun. The sun is rotating in our galaxy, around some giant black hole or something. All of that is part of the violin, and all of that is expressing the music in that moment. Without that tree, without the sun, without the earth, there would be no moment of expressing music. And besides that, all of the people that played music, the people who taught the person how to play the violin, the person who wrote the music, after generation of human beings, all in that moment are being expressed in one person's playing. So what is the self that's playing the violin? We don't find it just in the individual, and yet if that individual doesn't play 100%, the music isn't expressed. And yet they are unable to play anything without the entirety of this network of Indra's net, or whatever we want to call it. So many of us are familiar with that metaphor, Indra's net, this universe of interconnection. So that's what Bodhidharma is talking about. This self nature is wondrous and imperceptible. We can never really pin it down, and we can never express whether it's universal or whether it's individual, or it's both or either, or any way we express it is off. So this is what this precept is talking about. So this ignorance that is the intoxicant that Bodhidharma talks about is the ignorance of self. One way the Buddha expressed it was, he said that when a subject and an object come together, so when an object of our sense organs come together, some kind of consciousness arises. So when we see something, we see the computer here, it meets the eye, and the consciousness arises surrounding the eye. And he said that in that relationship, greed, hatred, and delusion or ignorance arise. That is the intrinsic part of that subject-object relationship. And so the ignorance is that I'm here, and that thing is there, and I need to manipulate it or get away from it, or I need to somehow compete with it, or the worth of that thing is based on my individual self. And that's the way we usually encounter life, of course, is that this person is here, that thing is there, and I need to somehow manipulate or escape or ignore the objects around me in order to get what I need. And that is the ignorance that Bodhidharma is talking about. That is a prescription for suffering. That's what the Buddha said. That's what causes all of our difficulty, this misunderstanding of the self and this subject-object relationship. So when we bring those objects in and we think that we have to somehow manipulate them, that's ignorance, and that's an intoxicant. We believe that we're the one playing the violin, I'm great, or I'm the one giving the dharma talk, or I'm the one doing whatever it is we're doing, the one who built a great big fancy building, or the one who did well on their test, it's me. Or conversely, I'm no good because I didn't do this well, or I made a mistake. We indulge in these intoxicants, all of the time, by really believing in this separation. So if I say that what I'm telling you about this subject-object relationship is great because I'm saying it's complete delusion, because I was taught this by my teacher, by Bodhidharma, by Shakyamuni, by Dogen Zenji. And yet, if we don't express it in the moment, it doesn't have any meaning. If none of us talk about it, of course, it's just something on the paper that doesn't have any meaning for people's lives. So anyway, this, I think, we're getting to more the meat of what Dogen Zenji is talking about here in this 5th precepts. So let's go on to before I say that, I'll just emphasize, this intoxicant in this perspective is believing in this individual self and believing in this subject-object relationship as something this self needs to manipulate. And that's kind of letting an intoxicant in to this self, that is boundless. This self actually, that, as I say, when you're playing a violin, you can never find. It includes the entirety of Indra's net. And so when we bring any of those things in as real, we let them in, that's a kind of intoxicating thing. So how do we not bring those things in to this universal self that's beyond one, beyond two, or beyond both? This is what Bodhidharma was talking about. So the Bomon Kyo, from where we get this precept in Dogen Zenji's lineage, says, the Brahmanet Sutra, the Bodhisattva precept says, a disciple of the Buddha must not trade in alcoholic beverages or encourage others to do so. So it's interesting, this is where it changes to selling intoxicants. He should not create the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of selling any intoxicant whatsoever. For intoxicants are the cause and conditions of all kinds of offenses. So that's the meat of it here, is this intoxicating thing that causes so many problems, this subject-object relationship that causes all of our suffering. As a Buddha's disciple, he ought to help all sentient beings achieve clear wisdom. If instead he causes them to have upside-down, topsy-turvy thinking, he commits a parajika offense. So, this topsy-turvy thinking, I think, is the inverted views that the Heart Sutra is talking about, that we chanted this morning. That they're, the inverted views that somehow this self is the one playing the violin, the simple kind of a subject-object relationship. That's one topsy-turvy view. That's one way of expressing it. There are many, many different ways of being ignorant and intoxicated. But that's one of the ways. So the point is in this sutra is that, of course, the irony is that since we are living in this Indra's net, we cannot ourselves just awaken alone, and we cannot ourselves keep this precept or keep the precepts or express our vow. You know, we cannot play a violin, we can't drive a car, we can't give a dharma talk, we can't cook our food. None of us can do anything alone without the support of innumerable other beings and phenomena. And so to say, I'm going to do it myself is a problem. And to say, so everything we do is an offering to all beings. And so if we say, I'm going to do this myself, or this is my practice, or my zazen, we commit this Bodhisattva parajika offense, and we let those intoxicants in. So I just wanted to explore this a little bit, you know, this way that we use this kind of subject-object relationship as an intoxicant. I talked about, you know, earlier in my life when I was in a different tradition as a teenager, and I had a kind of awakening. I had a kind of a religious experience, you know, with God, I called it back then, and it was a very deep thing, and it felt like I was completely at peace, and I'd found the truth, and I knew what my life was and what my direction was in my relationship to other people. And it, you know, it's nothing to criticize. It's not. It was a kind of a beautiful thing. But as I reflect on it now, it was sort of intoxicating, because what happened as a result of that, I think for me, is that I started seeing other people that were outside of my tradition or outside of my understanding of God or my understanding of our relationship to reality as wrong. Those people are wrong, and we're right, and we need to see if we can help those people come over to our side. And then sometimes it was like, these people are wrong because they're threatening our way, and we need to get rid of those people. Maybe that's another intoxicating, you know, a kind of anger or indignation. Sometimes it's victimization. I'm here, I'm the victim because those people are persecuting me, and so therefore they're no good. Blame is another intoxicant. Blaming those people, you know, it's a subtle thing. This self, I'm not saying nobody has any responsibility and there's no blame, but when we set up the self and other as real, as fundamentally real, and we don't remember that everything I encounter is this self beyond self, we're indulging in this kind of intoxicating relationship, I think. You know, there's a quote that I talk about a lot, and it's from the Sutta Nipata, which is one of the earliest Buddhist texts. So this is from early Buddhism, and the Buddha says, the wise person doesn't see others as inferior to him or herself. He or she doesn't see them as superior to himself or herself. And then the real insight, he or she doesn't see them as equal to themselves. So it's a koan. What does that mean? There's only three choices, right? Either either we're all created equal, or there's some kind of relationship. But he's talking about this self beyond the self. When we measure, you know, and we distinguish one person's life from our own, and we make this concrete dichotomy, that's indulging in a kind of intoxicating situation. And I think it's really interesting that the Buddha said that in one of the earliest texts that we really think contains his actual voice, you know. And he was talking about this, I believe. So I think for me, whenever I feel angry at a person or judgmental or feel like a victim or whatever, or I feel like something is persecuting me, I can understand if I need to step back, I'm indulging in an intoxicant. It feels good to feel outraged, you know. So it feels good to think that you have the moral high ground, or it even feels good to feel persecuted. It can, you know, it can. And so again, I'm not saying this is the problem, though. If we stick in any point, we have a problem. And that's kind of the problem we encounter in this Boman Kyo, is that actually we have to recognize that there is some difference in order to express our shared life. Unless we understand that it's my role to play the violin, there can be no music. Unless we understand that your life is different and I have to respect it, and I can never fully understand your perspective because I'm not in your head. If we don't respect that, then we have some kind of solipsism, or, you know, we make another big mistake. And yet, how do we, you know, take that subject-object relationship without making it an intoxicant? So, yeah, to me, this why, you know, charismatic leaders of big movements, great sages, somebody who says they have an enlightenment experience and then they cannot make a mistake ever again. It's kind of, to me, you know, red flags start going off, because my teacher never said anything like that. And you know, if someone, I think the more we understand and awaken to this reality, the more we see how limited our view is. It's one of the ironies. You know, the people I think that I respect, or we can see, the people with often that have the most insight are the people who understand their own limitations too, most deeply and humbly. So there's all kinds of ways that we can indulge in these intoxicants, but I want to come back to the actual commentary that Dogen Zenji gave here. So he says, not selling intoxicating liquor, do not bring intoxicants in, do not let them come in. This is truly the great brightness of wisdom. The other way of translating would be, do not allow even that which has not yet been brought in to trespass. This is truly the great brightness of wisdom. So my teacher gave some lectures on this precept, really fascinating, but I won't go into it because it's sort of a complicated thing, and it's you can find it yourself. But he basically, what Dogen Zenji is saying here, or my teacher's interpretation is that well, the common interpretation is that we don't let anything in to this self. We don't let any subject-object relationship come in. We practice with that understanding that we cannot let them come in. But through a different way of interpreting this, through the language that Dogen Zenji used, he basically says, don't even let not letting in. Something like this. Don't let in, not letting in, or something to that effect. So there was a koan that my teacher cited with Tozan Ryokai and a monk, and he asked him a question about, bringing in these things through the gate of the self. So, this gate, this of things outside of me, I need to regulate or protect myself from, the individual self. So, the monk, Tozan asked the guy, many times about this koan of what it means to not bring in anything through the gate. And eventually he gets it right after 96 tries. Long story short, he says, even if intoxicants come in, there's nowhere to put them down. I don't have a room to put them down. And it's kind of a mind-blowing thing to me when I think about it. I think what he's saying is that how do we practice with others without making them an intoxicant? So how do we not let anything in? How do we practice with this subject-object relationship as the self? So don't even say there is other. How do we really do that? How do we, Dogen Zenji says, we don't let anything even in, not even saying that we don't let it in. Even saying that it's let in or not is extra. And so that means, I think that has to do with our Zazen practice. First of all, that's the foundation. So when we're sitting in Zazen, everything comes up, we encounter everything, and we don't reject anything, and yet we don't hold on to it. Or when we are letting it in or grasping onto it, we release, we relax and open the hand, as Okumura Roshi said. And so everything is completely welcomed and yet completely negated or completely, not grasped. So it means just this moment, is this self beyond perception and beyond comprehension? That is the self that we manifest or that manifests us, or beyond either in Zazen practice. So Dogen Zenji, I think, is saying, just this moment, using off the cushion, or not using, but being just this self, and without letting this subject-object relationship have a place to settle in the room. We sort of let it in, because without saying there's separate people, as I say, we have no way to make an offering to them. I cannot make this talk without you. And there's no one talking here without somebody listening to it, but there's no way I can say anything unless I say, well, I need to prepare for this. And, I need to say some words, of course. It sounds ridiculous, but that's the reality. So we kind of pretend that we have this subject-object relationship, and yet how do we practice with it without letting it in, without having it become real as an intoxicant? So in a very, just a very short, brief way, I think that's what Dogen Zenji is saying here with this precept. He's saying we don't let our concepts be real. We have to use our thinking. Thinking is never negated in Dogen Zenji's teaching, and yet we don't allow it. We don't believe in our thoughts, and yet we need our thoughts in order to express our vow. We can't do anything or very much as a human being. There's no way I could have prepared for this today at all without thinking. Shakyamuni, I think he was a good thinker. Dogen Zenji was brilliant, I think. Used their thinking and artistry as an expression of vow. So, how do we do that? By letting go. I think what Dogen Zenji is saying, letting go of this idea of the gate, that there is a gate at all. And he expressed this, Okumura Roshi said, everything I encounter is my life. Everything I encounter is the self, is another way that Dogen Zenji said this. So everything I encounter is the self. I can't do anything. This talk would be meaningless without you. I would have nothing to say. And yet, if I don't say it, it doesn't happen either. Just as the person, playing the violin is really playing with all beings. So this is my understanding of this precept, the deepest meaning of this precept that at this point. So I think that's all I have to say about it right now. And I'm not sure, I couldn't remember if we have a period now for comments, or if we just end here. Do we have a question and answer period, or do I just stop here?
Yes, we do take questions both in the Zendo and online. And Hojo, would you like to start online, or do you have a few comments?
I have a quick comment that I usually hold till the end, but I think it just fits into what Shoryu is saying. And I gave a series of talks on addiction here at one time. And you're talking about intoxication, and we usually associate the extreme forms of that with addiction. And somewhere I came across Dogen Zenji saying that when the monk takes the tonsure, in other words, when they first shave their head, they are already intoxicated. So I think that's part of what he means. They're already in. We're already in the soup, and there's no way to not be in the soup. So it's not a matter of keeping it out or having a gate, and you stay inside the gate and it's all outside the gate. That gate is non-existent. So, but when you look at addiction, it's interesting the way the AMA defines an addictive substance. They say it is any substance which, when withdrawn from the addict, occasions a significant degree of discomfort. All you have to do is apply that to air, water, food, warmth, shelter, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see that these are all, by medical definition, addictive substances. 5 minutes without air, and you're either brain damaged or dead. And with water, it takes a couple of weeks, maybe, or a week. Food takes longer, and so forth. But they all meet the definition of an addictive substance. So we're already in it. Maybe you can speak to addiction a little bit, Shorty. That's a little more extreme than intoxication.
Yeah, thank you, Tyne. It's a great point. I mean, I think one of the points there is intoxicants, anything that we encounter in our life, the way that we practice with them is our relationship with them is the main point. So Uchama Roshi talked about this, or actually it was Sawaki Roshi, or the Lotus Sutra. It was really the origin of it. We encounter things in our life either as toys, that we think that we're manipulating them, things that we play with. They make us feel good, or they make us feel better, or somehow they entertain us, and yet they are really defining us if we approach them that way, or who is manipulating who. So in this subject-object relationship, the way we encounter the object is really, there's no particular way that we can say everything is this way all of the time. And the most important thing is our practice, the way that we, encounter it. So, but in the instance of addiction, it's very clear. I think we need to look at, this is the other side of the Buddha's teaching, is cause and effect, and how this encounter is affecting our life in this moment, in this time, and what are the things, the habit patterns, the substances that allow us to behave in a wholesome way, or even an unwholesome way. And when we've, on one side we say everything is the self, and yet we on the other side, we have to nurture this self through cause and effect and study the things that nurture our ability to manifest this self that is beyond self and other. So some of us have to say, I can't drink a beer, or I cannot, I cannot smoke a cigarette. And for us, that's absolutely what we have to do. The problem is, I think, when we start judging others using these precepts, and we judge these other people as either good or bad according to the way that we need to practice, or our tradition or our understanding goes. So thank you very much, Tayun, for that. Thank you.
I think if we approach it as it's all addictive in some sense, it's all addictive just to stay alive. You are addicted to these substances and situations. If we approach it from that basis, rather than saying that we're not intoxicated, we're not addicted, we're sober. If we approach it from the perspective that no, we're all intoxicated, we're all addicted in some sense, it's a much more healthy attitude going in. We're realistic.
Yeah, it's really true. It's really true. We are completely dependent. We can call it, whether something is an addiction or a dependency, we're completely dependent on other things. No matter what we do, we're.
Wonderful talk. So far, don't screw it up, anybody. Okay, John, I think we go online. We take turns typically. Shoryu, we go online, in-house, online, in-house. And I think Joseph had his hand up first.
Thank you for the beautiful talk. Yeah, no, it was like dense and well argued and just very thoughtful. And auspiciously enough, I was actually at a symphony yesterday evening watching a performance of Holst's The Planets. So I was also resonating with sort of the cosmic themes of your discussion. But I was remarking to a friend, sort of as we were walking in to the orchestra hall, was, like, if you think about it, this entire thing is arranged for you. And his wife pointed out, well, not you personally, you as the audience. But she agreed. It's like, it is here for you. And so I don't know, but there's also a very interesting moment just as an audience of a symphony when it's clear there's no longer a group of individuals in the room, that there's some kind of depersonalization which has taken place. And I do think music is like almost unique, or at least very special among the arts, in terms of being an escape from the black hole of consciousness or subject object, really, however we want to talk about that. But I think just a tiny point would just be about Zen and toxins, and how you can get drunk on pure water, right? There's a holy enthusiasm that's distinct from all the illusions of consciousness and all your sadness and suffering, and that is more of a self beyond the self. But it is ambiguous, right? You can get to that. It's just like music, right? You can get to that place through love or through hate. And I guess, just thinking about the self, and I guess Jiko would, be the Uchiyami Roshi kind of approach to it, would just be, and I mean, there's something in very early Buddhism here too about the self, about like, you should love yourself more than anyone else in the world. Like, no one else is going to love you in the way that you can come to love yourself. And that there is a sort of empathy and connection with, what you're actually facing in the world, that it doesn't hopefully devolve into self-pity. But I don't know, there's an interesting balance there around like recovering and maintaining a certain dignity, an agency around yourself, in order to take beneficial action in the world on behalf of sentient beings. But yeah, I don't know. I think the word itself is always a puzzle, I think. But thank you so much.
If you're online, feel free to post a digital hand. You could wave a hand for a moment, or you could post a question in the chat box, whatever you're comfortable with.
Shorty, I think you're on mute. And he came off. Oh, he came off, okay.
Do you
Yes,
want to go ahead?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I'm not sure what your kind of form or etiquette is here, because it feels like I could say so many things about how people comment, but maybe your tradition is to go through. I don't want to comment on what people say and make it too long, or so. What do you advise me? Is it okay if I just sort of respond a little bit, or should we let people express themselves and I could say something at the end?
Typically, you respond to each one as briefly as possible so that everybody has a chance to say something. If you wait till the end, you'll have such disparity of comments, you won't be able to cover it.
Right. Okay, thank you. Good. Well, I really appreciate your comments, Joseph. And it's funny that last week we talked about music, and it's a very good point that, of course, the person listening to the music is also 100% part of the experience. And the way the art can kind of bring us into the moment, and the boundaries between each other dissolve, Yeah, I think most of us understand this. And the problem is, of course, we can't live in the world of music all the time. So how do we, how do we express this connection and reality, use this kind of inspiring moment to, practice after the work is finished in time and space, even though, that Dogen Zenji is saying that resonates through all time and space. When we hit the hammer of emptiness, we really don't understand that, but that is echoing through the past and the future. But I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a very good point. Thank you.
In-house, anyone? You? Cheer up. Okay, I'm good. Okay, we're good here. Let's do somebody else online.
I believe Ungan was the next hand that went up, and then Terry will be after him.
Thank you so much for being with us. And John, I took my hand down, but since you called on my name, I'll go ahead anyway. Back to this thing about Dogen saying, don't let things in. A two-part question. We really can't do that, can we? Things are going to come in. Isn't it better to look at this like when things come in, don't get overly attached to them and learn to let them go, as opposed to saying, well, we're not going to let any of that bad stuff in.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's part of his point. We even saying don't let in is kind of extra. Even saying that there's a gate or that we need to avoid letting it in is kind of extra. So, Ucham Roshi called it vow and repentance. So we stray from our vow. As you said, we do let them in. But we just return to this reality here and now as repentance, or that is the way we don't let them in. Or, in that moment of returning, we kind of go to the place beyond before and after. This here and now is beyond in and out, before and after, here and there. It's beyond all of these measurements that we use to measure our practice and whether we're doing it right or doing it wrong, whether we're letting them in or not letting them in. I think his point was just, we really go beyond all this measurement here and now in our Zazen, and how do we allow that to manifest in our daily life as well, allow our Zazen practice to manifest. So Absolutely right. We let them in, and we can't just say that we're somehow an enlightened being that never lets them in. But I think his point is that we go beyond measuring in and out, any kind of measurement when we repent in this moment, just return to this reality beyond measurement. So it's a good point, very good point. Thank you.
Thank you for your teaching.
You're welcome.
Oh, Joe, do we have someone in the Zendo?
I think Yoji has something to say here.
Yeah. So, what you were saying was basically, and I never looked at it this way, that an intoxicant could be anger, for instance. And that's what you were saying, right? I mean, I think you alluded to that. And also, I know in Uchiyama's teaching, and you also brought this up, was that, this is my world. And he talks about when I see someone, they're being reflected off of my retina. So they're in my world. And I think of that kind of, I don't know, it's what I thought about when you were talking about Uchiyama in my world and basically object and self, that, you're in me because this is my world and that I should take care of this world. But in terms of, the intoxicants, like in anger, I just wanted just to validate what you're saying. So basically what you're saying is that in the same way that we're sitting and a thought arises, that we shouldn't grasp it. And I found that through my sitting that, in everyday life, that if I were to get angry, that I can identify that anger, because in my life I find that basically anger just kind of snowballs. But if I can stop that thought, I can release it, then it doesn't affect me. And so then I think what you're saying is if you do that and come back into the moment, then it doesn't cause disruption within the Sangha. Again, just anger as an example. Is that what you were saying during this talk?
Yes, thank you. I think so. Absolutely. We cannot rid ourselves of anger. We can't. Anger is empty too, and anger. We can get some insight and some level of control over it, but like our thoughts, we can't really just root out our anger. Because what is that really but our life energy? Whether something kind of becomes anger when we act out on it, or when we bring it in, or when we say that it's real, or we say that we're indignant, and as you said, it snowballs and becomes larger and larger, and the separation between self and other becomes more and more pronounced, and we become more right maybe, or more indignant, or more self-righteous, or more victim, more a victim, or whatever it might be. But as you said, just if we don't grasp that, or if we accept it completely, recognize it, and don't try to cut it out, don't say it doesn't exist, admit it, study it, practice with it, let it go, then we're not dragged around by it, or then we can have some practice with it, rather than having it just rule over us. I mean, another way of defining intoxicant might be it's something that sort of takes over our life, and something that we become subjugated to. That's another way to think. It's really a disruptive thing in our life, or something that we're addicted to. An addiction is something that really disrupts a healthy way of life. So, yes, thank you very much.
Gary, do you still have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. And good to see you, Shoryu and Tayun. Let's see, it's been a while since I've put on my Roxu, or I might interpret that as checking in with my practice intention, practice vow, but I've been thinking of it in terms of intention, and especially with regard to precepts and using intoxicants. So how does awareness of precepts enhance my practice intention, development of my vow? I think that's the crux of what I'm reflecting upon this morning, given this opportunity. Acknowledging or checking back in with one's practice intention and how am I supported? How do I support myself or in realizing a personal intention or personal vow? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I think it's to me an important way of expressing it, of understanding these are the Bodhisattva vows, and that's really what it's about, rather than trying to conform to a certain set of rules. This is, how do we express our vow or our intention or our connection or this self beyond self in each moment. And to me, they're very helpful, or to sort of study these relationships from a different perspective, from perspective of intoxicants and sexuality, or speech, lying, stealing, all of these things that are part of human behavior and are part of this reality of self beyond self. So yes, absolutely, expressing this vow.
And I think the Zen practice, if I might say, our practice, doesn't happen we're not taught. It doesn't happen in isolation, and it includes even the non-practicing members around us in our community, but and also the practice community. But being open to feedback, I think, is also essential in practicing honestly the precepts and, in this case, use of alcohol. How is it for the others?
Mm.
So that's the Sangha aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that's the one of the three treasures. That's why the treasure is so deep, is that we have this place where we trust that everyone, their endeavor, their intention is to express their life as vow, or as the connection with all beings. And of course, we make mistakes like every other community does, but we trust that as a foundation, we have our vow, our zazen, as the motivation, or rather than the subject-object relationship. Most of the other places we encounter in our workplace, or we can have good working environments. We have some that are better than others, but it's hard to understand, what our connection to others really means sometimes in a community, or what it means to the others in the community. But here, hopefully we can trust that we can approach someone with feedback, or ask them for feedback, and know that their vow is the basis for that conversation, and our vow, So it's a very precious thing, the Sangha.
Do we have someone inside this endo with a question?
And Keiko has a slide forward from my camera, Keiko. Keiko-san.
Thank you for your talk. This might be a repeated question, but when you mentioned about the gate and not even considering there is a gate, that is trying to say that the subject-object idea itself makes the gate present. So it's just even beyond that. So there's no differentiation of yourself because, as Robert mentioned, your world is what you see and it's within you, which means there's no differentiation. Is that what you mentioned was about?
Yes, I think that's a deep part of it. And something that comes to mind is that we just got finished studying Dogen Zenji's second chapter of Shobo Genzo, which is a commentary, on the Heart Sutra. And, of course, the Heart Sutra says form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And somewhere in that Makahanya Haramitsu, that commentary of Dogen Zenji's, he says, form is just form. And emptiness is just emptiness. It's kind of mind-blowing, it's almost like, well, you think he's negating what the Heart Sutra says, but I think, his point is that when we really encounter form, we encounter emptiness. So when we encounter, we don't have to separate it out and say, I'm encountering you as myself. We don't have to make the distinction. We just practice. And yet, so because we do need the separation in some way, so this is really beyond expression. There's nothing we can say that really captures what the reality is, because as you said, everyone we encounter is just arising in my consciousness as the self. And yet, this arising of the self is completely dependent on others. So both of those things are 100% true. And we really manifest the reality of that in the moment of Zazen, or in the moment of encountering you as self, where we let our Zazen practice express our encounter with others, our encounter expressed as Zazen. So, yes, unfortunately, anything we kind of say, we usually have to err on one side or the other. We kind of make a mistake.
So it's not really possible to be so, but kind of having that awareness at the corner of the mind. Of course, whatever you see, whatever you experience at work, there is something emotion arising, but then sometimes it helps me at least to remember. So they're stepping back and there is no differentiation. And if you try to think every experience is me and not a reflection of something coming to me, but it's my reflection within, or oneness, but just, yeah, it's not possible to actually appreciate the whole big thing in daily experience all the time. The mind is all just going wild, but then sometimes at the corner of the mind it seems to help trying to have, and it is mind-blowing. So to have think of things as no boundary, that and it's kind of uh, freeing, I guess. In a sense, you can think that you have actually sort of a control of knowing that there is no boundary. Maybe not making sense, but thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for your question. I mean, it's difficult to express this. One thing I would say, one way I like to talk about it is we get together here and we talk about the Dharma and we practice together. And the teachings, in a way, are sort of a way to bolster our faith, to let go and express this reality in the moment. So there's really no way to express this reality other than express it in the moment. If we're thinking about the fact that we're going beyond self and other, we're just thinking. I think that's kind of Dogen Zenji's point of not letting in, even letting in, not letting in. We don't even let in, not letting in. So whenever we think we have it, when we think we have it figured out, we really don't. We're outside of the way when we think we know. And yet, if we don't think, we're lost. It's really, we can go in a wrong direction if we don't use our human thinking, because human beings are thinking creatures and we need our thinking. And when we practice with our thinking, that too can become is an expression of emptiness. Of course, our thinking comes from Buddha too, or from God or the universe or Ender's net or whatever we want to call it. But our relationship with it is really the point. That's the thing we can practice with. We can't really control our thinking, but we can, in this moment, express a healthy relationship with it and this indescribable self, I think.
Joe, do you have a comment?
We follow up on that one. Keiko's use of the term reflection sort of triggered it. In Tozan Ryokai's Precious Mirror Samadhi, Hoka Zammai, the title verse he comes to says, although it is not constructed, it is not beyond words. Like facing a precious mirror, form and reflection behold each other. And then it goes on to say, you are not it, but in truth it is you. And I think it's trying to say the same thing in one of the most eloquent expressions of it that I've come across, that Shoryu is getting at here.
Yeah, Tozan said it a lot better, but
well, the translator did a good job, I guess.
Yeah, I think probably poetry is a good medium for expressing this, and Dogen Zenji used a lot of it. That's why we have this tradition. I think in Zen, in Buddhism in general, art is really a key way to express these things beyond thinking.
Siri, do you still have a question?
So we kind of got around to my question through everyone else. I guess all I really have to say is thank you for the teaching, Gasho. Good morning to everyone. And gateless gate. I think that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you, Siri.
If there are no further questions, John, I suggest we go ahead and close out with the four great vows, as usual, Dharma closing verse.
Okay.
Beings
Are numberless. I vow to free them.
Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The
Buddha's way is
unsurpassable.
unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Beings are numberless.
I
I
vow
vow
to
to
free
free
them.
them.
Illusions
Illusions
are
are
inexhaustible.
inexhaustible.
I
Vow to end them.
Dharma
Dharma
gates
gates
are
are
boundless.
boundless.
I
I
vow
vow to enter them. The
Buddha's
Buddha's way is
unsurpassable.
unsurpassable.
I vow
Vow to become it.
beings
Beings
of
are
numberless.
numberless.
I
I
vow
vow to
free
enter
them.
them.
Glories may the dawn be exhaustible. I vow
Vow
to
to
end
end
them.
them.
Dharma
Dharma
gates
gates
are
are
boundless.
boundless.
I vow to them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you again, Shorty. Thanks all for your patience and listening.